So, hello everybody, and thank
Hello.
you for taking time out and being here today. So, along with my fellow core group members of GLAC South Asia, I welcome all of you to the first dialogue on urbanization and happiness. This is the first in the series of GLAC South Asia Leaders Dialogue titled Rethinking Urban Spaces for a Happy, Sustainable, and Inclusive Future. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Paromita Dattade. I'm joining from New Delhi, India. I'm a member of the GLAC Leadership Academy community. A little trivia about myself. I'm a city planner by training. I've spent more than 22 years in the urban development sector, focusing on evidence-based policy making. I've worked with several ministries of the Government of India in internationally funded projects by UN like UNEDO, UNDP, multilateral donors like ADB, World Bank, and many others. In all these years, I've engaged with multiple stakeholders, created knowledge hubs, innovations labs at South Asia and national levels. And at present, I'm a senior lead at a premier think tank of the Government of India called the National Institute of Urban Affairs. For those of you joining just now, welcome once again. Now, let me give you the context of today's webinar. We all agree that cities bring with them agglomeration and productivity benefits, inspire new ideas, innovations, and help achieve higher incomes and living standards. At the same time, cities also create a lot of negative externalities, such as urban sprawl, crime, congestion, and often life-threatening pollution levels. The current pandemic has raised the question, will concentrated, high investment, high density cities have a prominent place in the new emerging world? Are they successful at providing an adequate return on investment? Above all, do they provide a quality of life and happiness to all the inhabitants? To discuss this, we are privileged to have with us today two very eminent speakers and experts in the domain of urbanization and happiness. We have with us Professor Thakur Podiel, former Minister of Education, Royal Government of Bhutan, and Professor Priyadarshi Patnaik, Chairperson of the Rekhi Center of Excellence for the Science of Happiness from the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kharagpur in India. Professor Podiel, Professor Patnaik, a very warm welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Thank you very much.
I introduce our distinguished speakers for the day and proceed with the agenda for the day. I would like to make a few housekeeping announcements. Kindly keep your mics on mute when the speakers are presenting. We are going to have a question and answer session after both the speakers have made their presentations. However, you can always type your questions in the chat box as we go along. We would love to hear from you. So we are going to run a poll during the course of the webinar, and we look forward to your active participation. We will record this webinar. And lastly, my request to the speakers to kindly adhere to the time slots allocated. Thank you so much. I would now like to call upon Dr. Webke Koenig, head of the Global Leadership Academy, to say a few words. Over to you, Dr. Webke.
Thank you so much, Paramita. A very warm welcome from me to all of you again. And I must say, I'm very honored to be today in this virtual space and see you all. I would like to give a little framing to everyone as well on behalf of the Global Leadership Academy. So those of you who might not know us yet will get this sort of a little bigger picture. And it's also in a way, it's slot or a possibility for me to share my admiration for all the energy and activity that has developed during the past years. So the Global Leadership Academy, which I had the honor to head as a program, was implemented we started implementing in 2012 implemented in the framework of the German Development Corporation, GIZ, and commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Development and Economic Cooperation. So the idea of the Global Leadership Academy was not a training center or anything like that. It was rather to draw together global or change agents and leaders in the sense of thematic leaders. So not the CEOs of the world, but people who stand and fight or live for a cause. On the pressing complex challenges that we face on the globe. So more or less the SDGs. Complex in three ways. Complex time-wise, because it was very clear for humankind at that time already, and through the SDGs in 2012, that it's not going to be, a solution is not going to be found for any of these huge challenges within a sort of, maybe not within the generation, not within 5 years or something. So the Agenda 2030 aims at 2030, but we still don't know if we will manage to live up to that. So it's a time complexity, and it is also a sectoral complexity, because we all know that no one sector, be it the politicians or the private industry, or be it the sort of the academics, will get up with solutions for these challenges. So the second complexity here, and then globally, because it's not a problem or a challenge for one part of the globe or one region anymore, but we are talking about questions. And I think the pandemic parameter was just hinting at, shows us that in a very, very lively way, so to speak, at the current moment. So it was quite clear to approach these kind of complex problems, we have to find different modes. So the idea was to create dialogue spaces to draw together people from north and south, east and west, from all different sectors, from all different generations, to have real inclusive sort of formats to discuss these questions, also from different perspectives, people who are not aligned in their ideas about solutions, who are not aligned in their interests, and also taking an acknowledgement of the power differences that might be there in the system, because that is the system we live in. So to create some kind of formats like that, and we chose the social lab format to do that. And by now we have conducted 16 long-term processes like that. Also one on urbanization, and many of you who I see, including Sandu, Mome, and Paramita, and we are used to call each other by the first name. So I'm also not Dr. König, but Wiebke. So I'm sorry if I sort of don't have the dignities here, but so who have been part of one or more than one of these processes. So that was the idea. But what happened and what is happening today here now is far more than that. And that's why I'm just so amazed by the whole thing, and humbled actually. But what we started or nudged, and it was not the idea. The idea was to build a new format, to create some kind of brand, the Global Leadership Academy for the German ministry. But what has happened, and I think in a way that's a positive effect also of the pandemic, if one may say so, and our sort of really falling back to digital formats, is that the people who have participated in these dialogues, and by now we are talking about a global community of more than 700 people from more than 120 countries, and we have more than 110 people in all of Asia here, and more than 20 countries in Asia also involved. They started to act, to cooperate, to collaborate beyond these facilitated spaces, because they found, or they defined themselves and gave themselves an identity as a true community. So what Anne, who's also in the call, and me by now, the GLAC team in GIZ sort of did more and more, and we are so happy to be able to do that, is we step more and more in the background. We are only merely supporting what you fantastic people do. And I think now the kickoff of the South Asia Leaders Dialogue is yet another big step ahead. We had similar developments on the African continent with the African community recently. And I'm just really, really humbled and proud at the same time to be part of this session today and all the sessions to come. I know I will learn a lot, I will leave wiser and inspired after this session, and looking forward to support whatever comes out of it. And thanks again from our side. That's all I have to say. And now I'm in the listener's role. Thank you very much. And I hand over to you, Momi.
Thank you, Dr. Webke, for the wonderful introduction. I now invite Dr. Momi Salim, Regional Coordinator of GLAC South Asia, to share her thoughts. Over to you, Momi.
Thank you very much, Pramita, and thank you very much, Dr. Webke. Honorable Professor Powdyel, former Minister of Education, Bhutan, Dr. Webke, Head of Global Leadership Academy, Professor Patnaik, Global Leadership Action Group core team, and dear friends, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are, because I do understand many friends have joined from other parts of the world as well, and we really thank you for taking time out for that. As the regional lead, Global Leaders Action Group South Asia, on behalf of the core team, I welcome you all to the initiation of Global Leaders Dialogue Series. I think this Global Leaders Action Group South Asia basically we started organizing ourselves for last 1.5 years now. And before me, Gaurav had been actually taking lead on this, and he has done tremendous job in also kind of keeping the community alive. Now it has come out as a regional platform of alumni of Global Leadership Academy, and at South Asia level, the alumni have come out as a regional hub to form an action community with the aim to foster partnership, co-create solutions, and enable collective action towards attainment of Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030. After several deliberations of 1 year or 1.5 years, the core group actually decided that we should be working together on urbanism as a topic for the year 2021. The reason is grounded in the fact that at present the urbanization footprint of humankind is 40%, and it is projected that it would go up to 68% by 2030. And South Asia, with a population equivalent to almost 25% of the globe, is a fast urbanizing region. Almost 35% of South Asians live in urban areas. This is also the region with the highest number of young people in the world. However, the urban development is not very promising in the region. Peri-urban areas are a common feature of the cities in South Asia. Most people move towards urban areas in the search for a better life. With high rate of urbanization, decreasing natural resources, sprawl, the city administrations are facing unparalleled challenges. The social, economic, and ecological gaps are widening with differentiated impacts on marginalized groups of the society. This is largely due to the unplanned urbanism and concentration of population around limited resources. And Pramita also mentioned this in her introductory remarks. Sustainable Development Goals also emphasize the need for sustainable and resilient cities that offer equitable and holistic opportunities and access to all. This is becoming more and more relevant with ever-increasing threats such as climate change and pandemic. National governments alone cannot provide all these solutions. Therefore, there's a need to foster partnerships at regional and global level. Urban regions are becoming important constituencies and building block for global governance. Hence, South Asia is also one such region that requires support and expansion of partnerships. Therefore, the Global Leaders Action Community, South Asia, while making use of its extended network in South Asia, as well as, of course, the larger Global Leaders Action Group, in other parts of the world, has initiated this dialogue series, which is actually geared towards rethinking urban spaces for a better and inclusive future. With this brief background and welcome note, I would like to thank and congratulate the core team, including Renika, Gaurav, Pramita, Manjunath, and Dr. Samdu, and of course, Anna from the GLAC for helping in conceptualizing and organizing the Global Leaders Dialogue Series. Also, just an announcement to be made here. that we would like to actually expand the core group. Right now, as I've mentioned, we are 5 or 6 people who are part of this core team, and we really welcome other alumni also to please come in and join us. We will be sharing email address in the chat, and you can write us an email by showing your interest that you would like to be part of the core group. And honored that the honorable speakers have taken time out to be part of this. So looking forward to insightful and productive dialogue today. Thank you.
Thank you, Momi, for setting the agenda and the very comprehensive narrative on urban issues in the South Asia region. As I invite Professor Podiel, please allow me to give a brief introduction about him. Professor Thakur Podiel is an educator by choice, conviction, and passion. He's the first democratically elected Minister of Education of Bhutan and is credited with introducing many path-breaking measures to build institutions. He has written many books. His book, My Green School, on holistic education has been translated into several major languages around the world. His other books include As I Am, So Is My Nation, Right of Vision and Occasional Views, Khyal Khab, Reflections on State, Citizen and Citizenship Education, and Light of My Life. Professor Podiel was highly respected Vice President of the iconic Sherup's College, founder director of the Center for Education Research and Development, President of Royal Thimphu. He is a recipient of the Gusi Peace Prize International, Global Education Award, the Distinguished Service Award for his outstanding work in education, as well as the Coronation Gold Medal 2008 and the Institutional Award, the Honor of Druk Thukse 2012. Professor Podiel is on the advisory boards of several organizations, World Happiness Foundation, World Environmental Education Congress, Global Entreps Foundation, Soul of Education Foundation, and is a member of the editorial board of research committees. The floor is all yours, Professor Podiel.
Thank you very much, Nikuza Zangpu. First of all, from Thimphu, Bhutan here. That very generous introduction already disarms me considerably, so I'm already feeling a little nervous. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Salim, Dr. Samrup, and all the members of the Global Leadership Academy community for this very kind invitation to participate in this very important conversation. I would like to begin by paying my tributes to the visionaries who thought that there ought to be a space such as this, the Global Learning Academy, to which would come people from all around the world. So wherever you are today at this point in time, whichever parallel or meridian or whichever coast, continent or country you are in, I would like to offer my very best wishes as you make sense of the world we live in, as afflicted as we are by the global pandemic. I would like to hope that all of you are keeping well and safe and looking after yourselves and your loved ones. In the introduction, it was mentioned that members of this community, individuals who support a cause. I happen to be a member of the audience today, and certainly the cause that I support is life. And I use certain means to help support this cause called life, primarily education, development, my love for the environment, and indeed for our institutions that we have inherited from our ancestors. I'm not an expert on urbanism or organizations. I'm primarily an educator. but I see things from a certain perspective that would include institutions such as the ones that the Global Leadership Academy, I understand, supports. When we look at cities, I feel that every city has at least two lives. One is the outer life that the eyes can see, and the other one is the inner life. The outer life is manifested in terms of the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the buildings, the banks, the institutions, the different paraphernalia that support life, communication, transportation, housing, health, environment, safety issues, your convenience stores and entertainment facilities, the city administration, what the eyes can see, that is something that is the tangible part of the cities. But I would also like to believe that every city also has an intangible, the subjective life. And it is this subjective life that very often gets ignored or not discovered at all. In Bhutan, His Majesty the Fourth King, Gyalpo Jigme Singye Wangchuk, thought that a society or a nation ought to look at progress in a holistic way, marking a very significant departure from the conventional GDP model of development measured by gross domestic product. And in 2010, the Ministry of Education of the Royal Government of Bhutan decided that the country's holistic development vision of gross national happiness has got to be infused with the overall management of our schools and institutions. So we introduced a program called Educating for Gross National Happiness. And His Majesty's vision of gross national happiness is holistic. It is supposed to be what I call the North Star. Every nation ought to have its own North Star, just as indeed sailors and mariners long ago, before precision equipment of the type that we have today were invented, looked at the North Star to find their direction to the safety of the port. So even today in the 21st century, countries, societies, people do need the help of the North Star to give them the sense of direction, the safety of the port. So His Majesty thought that Bhutan's development trajectory would have to be guided by our own North Star called gross national happiness. And if a nation has a North Star or a big vision like gross national happiness, the subsystems of that nation ought to embrace and advance that vision. So Education Ministry being a very large subsystem or the most important subsystem of the nation, we decided that it ought to do its part in advancing the country's holistic vision of development called gross national happiness. So we introduced a program called Educating for Gross National Happiness. And the strategy that we identified to advance this vision is called green schools, building green schools for green Bhutan. So I have to explain what green is. Green is a color, but more importantly, green is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for life. It is a metaphor for anything and everything that supports life. Life in its multiple variety, human life, animal life, bird life, reptiles, life in the sea, on land, in the sky, and everywhere in between. So a green school, so we can have a green school that supports learning in a holistic manner. We can have a green economy. We can have a green city. We can have a green government, a green society, a green nation, a green mind, a green heart, a green outlook, a green orientation. So green is anything and everything that supports life. So when we talk about a city, whose claim do we address when the city is planned? Whose claim? Is it the claim of the builder? Is it the claim of the environment? Is it the claim of the citizens, the people who dwell in the cities? Is it the claim of the corporations, claim of the factories, claim of the money makers? Whose claim do we address when we design a city? So just as in education, we have to address the multiple claims of the learner over and above the intellectual claim that is addressed generally by contemporary education. So also in city planning, we have to look at the multiple claims of those elements which make that city. So let me very quickly show you my mandala or the green school that can actually be replicated to where's my, it's okay. I want to hide. So in my green school, the first element is that of the environment. So in the same way, when we plan a city, I believe it is important to address the claim of the environment, the natural environment, I mean. Does a city have a natural environment? Today we are talking about in the pandemic period, we're talking about the preciousness of oxygen. So when our natural environment is rich, it has space for humans, for animals, for birds, for all kinds of life forms. A naturally rich environment is extremely important for life to survive and to flourish. So when we plan a city, does the city have this understanding of the need to address the claim of the environment? Do our planners think of the integrity of the city that is built by a rich natural environment? So the second element of a city could be the social environment. How rich the social environment is, how rich, how interactive, how supportive the social environment in the city is. Is the city planned in such a way that people are able to come together, interact with each other, support each other in times of need, and also celebrate together when there's a moment for celebration? Or do the people live in isolation like islands? How is the city planned? So the social greenery, how green is the city socially, just as how green is the city naturally. So the claim of the natural environment, the claim of the society, and the claim of culture. What are those cultural elements that make the city? How concerned are the planners? How concerned are the builders about the cultural artifacts? What are those cultural icons? What are those cultural landmarks of the city? Are there places for great cultural monuments? Are there places, opportunities and spaces for the celebration of the diverse cultural manifestations of the communities who come together to animate the city? Is that city culturally rich? What the kind of fine art there? What the kind of music there? What are the kinds of different artistic expressions, cultural expressions of the city? Are there cultural diversity in the city? So the cultural greenery is an extremely important claimant in the planning process of the cities. And of course, we have the intellectual greenery. How intellectually green is the city? How rich? What are those ideas that have gone to the making of the city? What the minds are highly awakened? What did the minds, what are those ideas that went into the making of the city? So the cultural greenery of the city is an extremely important claimant on the planning process. So when we build the city, when we design the city, we have to think of how culturally green is the city. The next element is academic. So what are those important milestones in the city? I believe that if the most important milestones of the city are our great universities, our great colleges, our great schools, our great learning centers, if the heart of the city is defined by a seat of learning, by a temple of learning, whether these are great institutions, great schools, great colleges, great universities, if the defining element of the city is a temple of learning, a seat of learning, or many cities, many seats of learning, we can say that that city has its soul in the right place. But conversely, if the city's defining elements are factories or corporations or huge commercial centers, we can say that the priorities are a bit misplaced. Part of the reason why there are so many problems all around the world in big cities is because the defining features, what are those elements that elevate the mind, open the heart, lift the mind, and extend the range of people's sensibilities? Are the sensibilities awakened, or are they are they are they dead? What are those elements? So I believe that it's extremely important to have these great academic institutions to be at the center stage of our cities. Then we have what is called aesthetic greenery. Aesthetics. How do we plan our cities? How are the buildings like? Our buildings, our structures have to fulfill at least two functions. Are they useful? And at the same time, are they graceful? Do our buildings, our structures, our facilities, how graceful are they? Or are they ugly collection of buildings, structures? So aesthetic greenery. Does aesthetics have a place in the planning of the cities? Or do we only make them to be economically, practically, commercially useful? So in order for the city to be pro-life, in order for the city to be supportive of life, supportive of human beings, in which people feel happy to be, this is going to be extremely important. The aesthetic sense. Are we sensitizing the people and facilitating the awakening of the aesthetic sense, the sense for the ability to appreciate beautiful things, graceful things, tasteful things? How are the buildings laid out? How are the walkways, the gardens? Are there open spaces? Are there places for museums? Are there places for artistic work? So artistic sensibilities, do our cities awaken the artistic sensibilities of the citizens who occupy, the people who occupy the cities? So aesthetic sense. The third element, the next element is spiritual greenery. Whether we like it or not, we are all spiritual beings. And spirituality has nothing to do with religion or religiosity. Spirituality is about our need to appreciate things which are more perfect than ourselves, which are better than ourselves, which are sublimer than ourselves. Our tendency to look for things which are more perfect, which are more full, which are more complete. So just as the flower kept by the window side tends toward the sun for fullness, for flourishing, and to be complete, so also the city inhabitants should be able to see certain things in that city that can lift their mind, that can awaken them, so that they tend towards those objects which make them extend the range of their life, extend the range of their sensibilities, extend the range of who they are. So does the city have those monuments, those tokens, those objects that can awaken those spiritual sensibilities of the people who live in the city? So finally, what are the ethical considerations? What are the ethical considerations when we plan our cities? Today, all around the world, most of the considerations are directed towards meeting the commercial, physical, material needs of the people who live there. But does the city, what are those principles? What are those defining elements that make the city? Does the city have those sensibilities in which the people are able to make a distinction between right and wrong? Are the people who live in the cities able to make a distinction between good and bad, truth and falsehood? At the end of the day, the life of the city, the integrity of the city is actually defined by the ability of the inhabitants of the city to be able to distinguish between right as opposed to wrong, good as opposed to something that is called bad, truth as opposed to something called untruth or falsehood. Imagine our cities which are able to make a distinction between right and wrong, good and bad, truth and falsehood. These cities will be happy cities. They will be livable cities. These cities will be pro-life. All the problems of lack of security, insecurity, fear, poverty, discrimination, inequities will not be as pronounced as they are today if we are able to plan our cities not only from the tangible, objective point of view, but also from the intangible, subjective point of view. Things which are visible to the eyes, but also things which are registered by our sensibilities, by our soul, by our heart. So in the planning of our schools, in the planning of our colleges and universities, in the planning of our economy, in the planning of our business, in the planning of our cities, if our sensibilities are awakened by our consideration for our natural environment, for the claim of the society, for the claim of culture, for the claim of ideas, claim of knowledge, claim of aesthetics, claim of ethics or morality, I believe we can build cities which are happy cities, cities which are pro-life, cities which extend the range of people's sensibilities, and cities built along these lines will make beautiful societies, happy nations, and a happy world. So even though I designed this model for our institutions, this can also be replicated in all areas of our life, in our planning. So we can have a green school, a green college, a green university. By the same token, we can have a green city, a green society, green business, green industries, green planning, green parliaments, green legislation, green judiciary. So green is something that is, green is an organizing principle. Green is an orientation of mind. Green is about life. So my green school is not only about education or schools. My green school is about life. It is about our planet Earth. It's about development. It's about the environment. It's about everything. So this model of a green school can also be a model for a green city. So this is what I thought I would present before you for whatever merit it may have. And if there are some issues later or queries, I'll be very happy to try and respond to those. So this is my model of a green school. It can very well be a model for a green city, a happy city for that matter. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor Podiel, for that wonderful and insightful presentation on the concept of green, touching upon all aspects of city life from the Green School. Thank you so much, and please be there. We will have the question and answer session after our second speaker has presented. We are sharing a poll for the audience just to know from you how you feel about our webinar today. So I request Renuka to kindly put up the poll. It will appear on your screen, and kindly take a few moments to answer it. Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay, I hope all of you can see the poll on your screen. Okay, so as you all answer the poll, let me take the opportunity of introducing our second speaker of the day. We have with us Professor Priyadarshi Patnaik. Professor Patnaik is the chairman of the Rekhi Center of Excellence for the Science of Happiness at the Indian Institute of Technology Kharagpur in India, IIT Kharagpur. He is the secretary, Nehru Museum of Science and Technology, and rector's nominee, Technology Students Gymkhana at the State Institute. His areas of research include relationship and well-being, visual communication, music and emotion, communication and culture, media communication, translation, and digital humanities. He has authored and edited more than 14 volumes of text, reference, and creative work. He has a number of research papers, translations, poems, short stories, illustrations, and photographs in many national and international journals. Over to you, Professor Patnaik. Thank you.
I mean, listening to whatever you have said about me is more humbling because I probably don't deserve such an introduction. My greetings to Professors Oeng, Professor Chetri, Professor Podiel, Professor Salim, Professor Dre, and all the members and invitees of the Global Leadership Academy. We have listened to, I would say, a poetic presentation by Sir, which was really beautiful. And I believe that speaking after that would be a fairly challenging job for me. While I would not be capable of integrating many of the components he talked about in concentric circles in the form of a mandala, I realized that probably there is a certain amount of universal appeal to many of the concepts he talked about. And they also get reflected to a certain extent in whatever I am sharing with you right now. So with your kind permission, I would move over to my presentation and share it with you. So I'll be sharing my own screen with you. That's fine with you. So what I'm going to talk about and what I've been asked to share with you is about measuring urban happiness. While Sir talked about schools in specific, but I would say that at a larger level, it was all about what could make urban spaces happy. My topic is, can we measure the happiness in such urban spaces? While there are a lot of theoretical orientations, a lot of examples where people have done significant work, I believe that my only contribution would be the fact that I have been a part of such an exercise, which happened in Kolkata, in a zone which is known as the New Town, which is a kind of a twin city, which is growing parallel to Kolkata. And because of our center being asked to take up the responsibility of assessing the well-being level or the happiness level of the people over there. So it is in that context that I will speak. So I'll try to be brief so that, and the slides are there. I will request the organizers to please share the slides and even my email ID if required, so that if people have queries or would like discussions, we can take it forward. Given that I have something like 16 or 17 minutes in hand, I will just try to concentrate on some of the basic concepts, raise questions, and hope that we have some interesting discussion where I can participate. And if not answer the questions, at least share the fact that these are areas or debates that need to be taken forward. The first question which comes up is that who is defining the happiness of urban spaces, or for that matter, any space? Who is defining my happiness? And you find that this is a kind of a consensus move. And we have, of course, the history of the desire for measurement of happiness with gross national happiness concept leading the way. But you see that happiness, life satisfaction, meaningfulness are in some way also linked to productivity. So economies, countries wish to know about the happiness of the people because it makes happy people make easier people to handle. So there is an organizational vested interest, I would say, a national vested interest in trying to keep people happy. Okay, so without being critical of governance, I would say that throughout the history we have seen that appeasement or happiness at some level, they are distinguishable terms, is something which organizations, societies, governments would like to do so that people are satisfied and it is easier for the smooth functioning of the mechanisms that operate there. So we have government, we have civic bodies, we have also commercial agencies who would like to measure material well-being, material happiness, because that is linked to, in some way, the purchase or the sale of their products. Then, of course, spiritual leaders, seekers, philosophers, whom I have not included here, because unfortunately in the current times, although they significantly do communicate, have a significant presence even today by many spiritual seekers who share formulas for happiness, measurement is something which probably is not done in that formal way. And of course, the people. So some people would like to assess whether they're happy or not. But then you see that as we start looking at it, this entire question of who defines also tells us how assessment takes place. So that strategically, we are talking about measuring happiness at the level of existential, I would say, level or existential elements related to the sense of meaningfulness, the sense of values, the sense of satisfaction of the people, but also in terms of many material things which surround them. So you might again think in terms of a different kind of concentric circle, where there is the individual, then there is the group, then there is the community, then there is the city, then there is the state, then there is the nation or the country, then there is the globe, the world. So happiness also operates in different ways at these different levels. By talking about this, I'm also raising issues about the challenges which are faced when we measure happiness. How is it measured? Now, this is a highly debatable area, so I will not discuss it in detail, but I will give a few examples as we move forward. And why assess it? Why is it relevant to assess it? I've said a few reasons for why it is assessed, because for various reasons, we want to know whether people are happy or not, whether a city is happy or not, because you see that if a city is a happy city, then more people come in. If it's an unhappy city, people move out of that city. So many things are related to that. So we would say that when we started doing this exercise for Kolkata New Town, we identified why a city would like to assess itself, because here was a city and its administrators who were very keen to measure their levels of happiness. So they said that we are interested for certain reasons. We also tried to identify why they would like to do that. So maybe identify infrastructure sufficiency of a city, identify happiness level of the people, key factors and their relationships, governance, identify different areas where different levels of happiness, different kinds of happiness and unhappiness persist, and of course, policies and periodic evaluation to find out whether the policies are working, whether they're successful or not. So you see that that brings us to the second part of my discussion, that examples of some measurements. As we moved ahead and started exploring, we found that there were more than 30 different, at that point of time in 2017 and 18, examples of different strategies used by different cities, different states, different countries, and different organizations for that matter, for measuring happiness. So here are a few examples that I would like to bring before you. So one of them I was involved in. I would definitely recommend you to the Global Happiness and Wellbeing Report 2019, of which I was a part of the team. Because when Ali started compiling this, and specifically Happy Cities Agenda, then he visited various countries, and when he came to India, we collaborated to visit Newtown and Bhubaneswar as two of the smart cities, happy cities that needed exploration. So you see that in that report, which looks at different parameters, I have indicated the parameters here that this particular report highlighted. What are the key points, parameters for the design of happy cities, and what are the enablers of happy cities? So that's why I said that people interested can go through this particular chapter in the report. Is the fact that many of the points that we are talking about, like culture, nature, that's why I said they are relevant, also emerged as significant components. And when Ali came to Kolkata and had a discussion with the administrators, he liked many things, especially the walkways which were shaded, the security for women, for which Newtown had some very interesting strategies, which I have indicated over here, that having, coffee houses which are open throughout the night at different places. So that would ensure that, because this is a place where the IT industry is there and flourishing, and many women have to come out late in the night after their work is over, so job is over. So that's one of the issues that had come up, and as I'll discuss at a later point of time. And these were some of the interventions in collaboration with, in discussion with us, that Newtown started planning. So there was a symbiotic relationship, and that's why I said that measurement might drive policies, and we will talk about it in a moment. But these were the parameters that they proposed. We also have the Happy City Index, which was assessed in 2016 in UK for many cities. And one of the key components amongst the parameters they were looking at, apart from equity and sustainability, were city conditions. So when we are talking about happiness, we are talking about city conditions. And here you can see that work, health, education, place, and community. This is how they divided it and they assessed it. So you have quality of work, income and unemployment, you have health, mortality and life expectancy, mental health also as a part of that, safety, housing, transport, green spaces. Again, I emphasize green spaces in the context of place. Community, again, I emphasize culture, participation, and here social isolation and local business. And they've mapped the well-being of the cities on those parameters. So that was something which was inspiring for us as we were searching for mechanisms for measurement. We have also examples of the ease of living index, which the government of India uses and would like to see in the context of the smart cities, where they're talking about 4 pillars: economic, infrastructural, social, and psychological. And some of them directly linked to the sustainable development goals as well. And you can see the way they are classified over here. And though I will not go into it, I'm trying to say that various parameters are taken into consideration in the context of measurement. There are, of course, other examples like the LG Life is Good study, which they have been doing for the last 3-4 years. And a recent thing which has come up is the Indian Cities Happiness Report by pilania.org. The report is also available, which has happened in 2020 during the COVID times with maybe 13,000 participants. And there also you find that the way you see that in the LG context, purpose, passion, and pleasure, the focus is, I would say, to a certain extent, distinctively materialistically oriented, because LG is a company which would like to sell. So he focuses on a different aspect of things. And here you are talking about somebody who is looking at it from work and related issues, relationship, health, philanthropy, religious or spiritual orientation. The reason for bringing up a few vignettes of different ways of measurements would be to share with you that measurements can happen in many different ways. And probably the context and the requirement of a particular city or a particular nation probably decides how it is to be measured. We have had debates because measurement is a very, very problematic area, that do we standardize? World Happiness Report standardizes across all the nations, 140, 150, I mean, depending on the data available, 160 nations. Is this standardization really justified? GNH, which has done a wonderful job, has 9 pillars. And then you find that the weight is given to the different pillars are equal, although the different parameters, number of parameters within the pillars are different. And there also we find that they have this beautiful concept of somebody just being spiritually happy is not good enough. Happiness has to be measured at least on 3 of those pillars, and even at least 3 to 4 pillars. If somebody is showing a certain degree of happiness, only then that person is considered happy. Because you see that you're not talking at an individual level, you're talking at a level of community, you're talking at a level of infrastructure for well-being of the entire system. So if a systemic approach would need that, more things are taken into consideration, just other than the mind or mental well-being. Again, the reason for bringing this up was to share that we had a lot of debates. We worked on various possibilities. We ended up listing more than 60 to 100 parameters which could be taken up in the context of cities for measurement. And what we realized is that probably if it is across a nation, then we have to go for a set of parameters which are common across cities for that nation. But if we were focusing on an individual city, we would need to focus on things which are generic, but also of great significance for that particular city. And hence we took up the new town example. And here I'm just giving you an indication. We did 2 sets of surveys with each time roughly 2,000 to 2,200 people. This is the first set of survey you're looking at. I have removed the details because this is a document for the particular city, which I cannot share. But if you're looking at the parameters, please find that we looked at services, gender concern, secondary education, economic condition, primary education, security, community infrastructure, cultural, governance, road, affect balance, emotions, environment, life satisfaction, relationships. So we looked at 11 domains and 14 key parameters emerged over there when we started looking at it. And we used very much like GNH, a primary method of surveys where surveys were taken from different households. We had more than 60 questions which people had to respond to. Each survey took something like 40 minutes or 50 minutes. And then later on, they were kind of analyzed to arrive at some guidelines. While the details are not important, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because of policy implications, or the way that a measurement can actually have some relevance in the context of the urban space which is being measured. So we found that the entire new town is divided into 3 action areas, known as action area 1, action area 2, action area 3. We also made a comparison with Kolkata, and we found that in different very interesting thing which emerged was that for all the areas, relationship was one of the key parameters, which decided whether people were happy or unhappy. Of course, for the new town, which was upcoming and new, transportation played a very significant role, whereas in Kolkata, it was security services and so on and so forth. But what we wanted to bring to your notice is the fact that once you realize that in which particular areas, which parameters are doing well and which parameters are not doing well. For example, as you can see, some of the parameters here are doing well: relationship, life satisfaction, environment, affect balance, roads, all these things are doing well. But then there are others like essence, hospital services, gender concerns, secondary education and primary education, which aren't doing so well. So this has policy implications. So for instance, the administration looked into the security concerns of women. It looked into the geriatric population, which is a very significant population in Newtown, and addressed those needs. They started looking at the way that hospitals and schools could be evolved. So you kind of got an idea of what was required and what needed to be done. So if you're looking at it, the relevance and policy implications, we identified women's safety, older people's needs, roads and transportation, heritage, environment, schools and hospitals as both positive and negative. For instance, environment and heritage was considered very positive because it's a green space compared to Kolkata. So it was treated very positively. You have the eco park, it's a huge space. You have a lake, a lot of water bodies and all those things. So the way we went about it is surveys, then we had findings, and it had policy implications, some of which the administration took into consideration. But I must say that we have also worked with Madhya Pradesh, we have worked with Newtown. One of the major challenges happens to be the implementation at the level of policies, because measurement is fine, but then you see that whatever you have measured, whatever you have identified, need to be accepted, understood by the bureaucracy which is working over there. So I will not talk about the issues that came up or the positive things which came up, but I'm trying to share with you that unless these measurements finally connect with policies, the entire effort doesn't become very, very meaningful. There are one or two other points I would like to make in the last 1 minute or so, which is the concept of happiness set point. One of the things that we identified as we did the survey in a gap of 18 months is that the set point of happiness level remains the same, which is roughly, let's say in case of Newton was over 7 out of 10. The people are generally happy at a certain level. And even if you give them better services, even if you give them better hospital facilities, better schools, and all the things they were asking for, at the end of the day, after they have received it, after the first 6 months or 8 months, the excitement wears off and they go back to their normal set point of level of happiness. So one of the lessons that we learned is that if you're just comparing it and saying that if we introduce these components, then people will become happier and we can measure it and we'll find that the measurement shows an increase. This is a myth. What we will see is a satisfaction with the different things, a sense of positivity, a desire to come and settle down in those cities. But the happiness set point for people is a constant. So even after natural disasters, even after huge family losses, even after divorce, set points go down for a couple of years and then they come back. And even after marriages, getting a job and all that, they go up for a couple of years and then they again stabilize at a particular point. So this is what I wanted to highlight also at the end. These were a few lessons I learned, and so I wanted to share these with you. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share whatever little we had done and what we experienced with this enlightened community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Patnaik, for that very engaging presentation. And I can completely relate to you, having worked in the urban sector for so many years, about having number of frameworks and indices and the focus so much on materialistic desires and not looking at it in a holistic manner and the intrinsic happiness, as we may call it. Thank you so much for sharing your experience about happiness index for in urban townships and your case study of Kolkata and the city in Madhya Pradesh. The floor is now open for questions, but before I do that, may I kindly ask you to give your opinion on the poll, which Renuka is going to now share with you. And after that, we can go ahead with the question and answers. Can you all see that on your screen? We asked you what was the reason that you participated in this webinar. And as a series, we plan to conduct the next webinar on sustainable infrastructure. We would like to know your views on this, whether you would be interested. Also, you're most welcome to give us feedback on any other topic that you may find to be of interest. And now I invite questions from the audience. Please feel free to ask. You can unmute yourself and ask the questions, please.
Hi, this is Elsa from Mumbai. Thank you so much. Both the presentations were very interesting. And I was wondering, this is to Mr. Patnaik. The Ease of Living Index is a survey that citizens take, right? So how do we verify the veracity of the data? Because we don't really have any control over who's taking it, are they well represented, and so on and so forth. So in order to, actually give scores to the city, how do you make sure then that it's truly reflective of the actual situation? And also there has been no, at least I don't think there was any information on what is this, how is it going to help you. So it's really anyone's interpretation of the survey. I remember taking it myself because I went to visit somebody in the BMC and they told me, please take the survey. So I did that. And I'm genuinely interested because I work on the topic of women's safety. And I'm also hosting the GDL Mumbai lab, which MOME is a part of. And we are looking at inclusion in cities in that lab. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just quickly respond. I believe that there are certain things which would need a much longer time to explain. There were also parameters which were not taken necessarily from the participants, but from existing statistics about infrastructure development over a period of time, comparison with other cities, which I have not shared because it was a whole complete project with a lot of parameters which were not based on surveys, individual surveys. But yes, you have a very valid point there. You have survey procedures, protocols where you go for random sampling. What we did, you see that in spite of the challenges that we faced, was that letters were issued by the Kolkata New Town Authority to the participants about the intent and the purpose of the survey. And we tried to take different categories of people who were who belong to the more affluent communities, people who also had shops, people who belong to the IT sector, people who were not staying there, not residents, but visited that place and went back, who worked in the different farms over there. So it was, to a certain extent, I would say, representative in that sense. That's one of the points I made. The point related to policy and other things, as you see, is that there are various challenges when you are working with administrators. Okay, we had a lot of support in certain areas. We also had faced difficulties in certain other areas. So you see that I would say the administrators and academicians look at things very differently. An academician's intent would be to give you an impartial view of things. And an administrator's intent would be to see that only good things come out so that they can highlight and emphasize what good has happened. So for us, what happens is that we submit the report impartially, whatever we have identified, to the administrators. We say that you can pick and choose and present or highlight whatever you want. We don't have anything to say about that. So yes, challenges are there at various levels, I would say. And I'm sure that you have also faced those such challenges. We have done a lot of other exercises. Initially, after these exercises, we wanted to identify that in each of these 11 areas, what were the individual level difficulties are they identified. For instance, you find that environment is well appreciated, but in certain action areas, mosquito bite is a major issue. Now, those would not come out in a generic survey of this kind. So we had little focus groups, we had other interviews with various individuals in the community to identify what were the three good things, the positive things they identified, what were the three negative things they identified. So different other tools were used. So it's just a small vignette of what we did that I'm sharing with you. But yes, we can discuss, probably not on this forum, but because it might be boring for others. But we did a whole lot of exercise over a period of 2 years.
Thank you for that answer, and I can completely relate to you about academicians and administrators, because I work somewhere in between the two of them. Yeah, Momi, would you like to take this forward with another question?
Yes, thank you very much to both speakers. My question is regarding the green schools. So, Professor, as you know that, South Asia has the highest number of young people. And you were talking about how these schools are also kind of, where you're raising awareness or kind of really, bringing young people to this. I just wanted to know if there is a kind of green skills development, because our government is right now focusing on youth development programs, and they are working on eco-innovation, for example, where they're bringing in, young people to really innovate the way we live in cities and the kind of environmental problems we have. And also, to some extent, how can we, bring in greener models of economy? So is there also a focus on that side somewhere?
Oh, thank you for this very important question. As I mentioned earlier on, in my very hurried and rather incoherent presentation, I normally take at least an hour to talk about my green school, but here we had to make do with the 20 minutes that we were given. Anyway, green is actually an orientation and organizing principle. So this could be used to not only for planning education, educational institutions, but for anything. It could be used, this model could be used for businesses. It could be used for agriculture, for economic development, for legislation, indeed, for governance. So the idea is to support life, because even for education, the first principle of education is to acknowledge the primacy and the preciousness of life. And then everything falls into place. Today, we are looking at matter. We are looking at physical quantities and ignoring the primary, in fact, constituent of all these endeavors that ought to be life. So that could also explain why a lot of our young people are not able to relate themselves with the world around them. The cases of suicide, homicide, alcoholism, the inability to work in a team. I think there is so much going on around the world in the name of education, but not all of which is education proper. But if we can think of education in a much more holistic way, make education serve life, serve the totality of our place in the scheme of things, including agriculture, including businesses. If we can think of everything holistically and use education as the instrument for bringing all this together, I think we will do a good job. In fact, one of the reasons why this model of my green school is making its rounds around the world is people see that this can be related to any occupation, any endeavor. So I feel that along the way, education didn't get the kind of, has not been getting the kind of support and understanding that it ought to get. As the members of the audience would know, there was a time long ago when education was called the noble sector. It was called the noble sector. No other sector, not even health, was called the noble sector. And the wise ones had had a reason to call the education the noble sector. It is supposed to help young people cultivate the nobility of their mind, cultivate the nobility of their heart, thereby leading to the cultivation of the nobility of action. So when the head and the heart and hands were engaged on the principle of nobility, we can imagine that such people, young people graduating from our schools, colleges and universities and joining the larger society would make a very big positive difference. So that's why, as I mentioned earlier on, Green School is pro-life. It is a pro-environment, pro-planet Earth. It is actually about good life, a good society, a good nation, a good world. So it can be applied to any area of human endeavor.
Thank you, Professor Podiel. I see that Anshika has raised her hand. Anshika, you can unmute and ask your question. After that, we'll go to Pema Wangda.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is that Professor Patnaik concluded in the end that there is a set, means a happiness set to which, you know, a person could be happy, more happy or a little more sad, and then return to that set point of happiness after any new change in the urban environment. Through the model of Dr. Podiel, is there any other way of increasing that set point of happiness permanently in the urban environments? Can there be, you know, a usage of both the models to achieve a continuous high or a continuous growth in that set point? That is one. Secondly, definitely I agree when Professor Patnaik says that we come back to that set point, because uh, there are so many other tourist locations, or say for Jaipur, for that matter, we as tourists might go and engage in that environment, while it might not look as engaging to the people who live in that deteriorating core. So what amount of flexible infrastructure needs to be introduced in urban environment which can keep the residents engaged and happy too?
So, sir, I think over to you.
Maybe what I feel is that I think these two presentations, the better one by Professor Patnaik and the not so good one by myself, could actually be married. We could have a golden mean, in the sense that I think the way I look at it is from a much more subjective point of view, much more perhaps shall we say, the softer dimension, the more subjective dimension, and Professor Patnaik looked at the more objective dimension. But both these are important. Shall we say that one is the soul and the other is the role? The soul has to manifest itself through the role, and the role needs the soul to feed it, to nourish it, to revitalize it. I think the soul and the role have to meet somewhere along the way, and both are possible. As a matter of fact, what ought to be happening in our cities today? Of course, a lot of our cities are empty thanks to COVID-19, and that's what I was addressing earlier on. What do we make cities for? Why do we build cities? I would like to believe that we build cities for human beings, for us, for life, But it looks as though we build cities for business. We build cities for commodities, for materials, the matter part of the universe. But human beings animate the cities. Human beings give life to the cities. And the human beings are the primary players in the overall construction of the cities. But what is not happening is that human beings do not have that opportunity to be the reason for the cities to come into being. Something else becomes the reason. Maybe it is business, maybe it is industries, maybe it is commercial activities. So what I think, if the heart is in the right place, if the heart is in the right place, we will build cities to which people would love to come. Cities that celebrate life, cities that honor life, cities that augment the process of living and the celebration living. Today's cities are stressful. There is tension, there is stress, there is anxiety, there is insecurity. Why should it happen? I think we have to begin with a proper envisioning of the cities. Why do we build cities? Whose claim do we honor in the building of the cities? The human claim, the environmental claim, the claim of the arts, the claim of ethics, the claim of spirituality. These are what give meaning and purpose and worth to life. Commodities are important. Economy is important. Wealth is important. But at the end of the day, the most basic needs of human beings are not necessarily material. The most profound longing of human beings is not commodities. It is those non-material, non-economic, non-physical elements, our emotional well-being, our psychological well-being, our spiritual, ethical well-being, our artistic cravings, our hobbies, our tastes, our sense of right and wrong, our sense of good and bad. These are what differentiate the life of human beings than the life of other lower order beings. So the human of the species ought to be at the center of city planning. Then everything falls into place. Sorry, this was only 50% of the time I should have had, but Professor, after, maybe back to yourself.
Thank you, sir. Wonderfully presented. I fully agree with you. I'll just make a few other points which are linked to them. And I think I would be able to indirectly respond to Pema's question in the process also. Imagine that we have two cities, one where people would be able to go and make a lot of money, enjoy themselves, buy things, all kinds of things that are there. It's beautiful, it's green, everything else. Imagine another city where people would have the basic needs, they would have sufficiency, but they would not have excess. But there would be a scope for peace of mind and transformation. The people who go into the smaller city, the second city I'm talking about, and opt for that, there is a potential for such people to cross the set point. Because a set point can only be crossed when there is a transformation. Unless there is a transformation, people's set point of happiness will not change. But the materialistic city that we are talking about, which we measure all around us, is one where set points will not change. So you see that it would depend on the temperament, who is going to which city. If the person who intends to transform herself goes to the materialistic city, she will never be happy. And if a person is in search of materialistic pursuits, then that person will not also be happy. I mean, the set point might go down. So this is a predicament, I would say. At the center are human beings, but then at the center, we also have the concept of choice. So we choose. And the science of happiness tells us that generally we have, to at least 50% of our happiness is biologically driven. We are genetically oriented to be happier and happy. Another 25% is my past experience, what I've learned, and my social upbringing and all that. there is only 25% chance that I might change. Just this 25%. So for the majority of us, even if you bring about all the material changes, as sir pointed out, happiness will not go up. If the city has potential for spiritual, mental transformation, and there are people who are willing to go undergo those transformations, only then for those people, the set point will change, they will become happy. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Patnaik and Professor Podiel, for bringing in the concept of actually access to the fact that you have access to spiritual avenues for being happy in a city. So it's not only about access to material stuff, but also access to the fact that you can actually get into more spiritual understanding of who you are, where you are, and what kind of city you want, and what do you want to be at the end of it all. Thank you so much. If there are, we are already at 3 o'clock, which is supposed to be the ending time of our webinar today. So may I now invite Dr. Samdu Chhetri, a very senior member of our GLAC core team, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Dr. Samdu.
Thank you, Paramita. Thank you so much. Well, GLAC South Asia wanted to start its first series of webinar talks on different matters concerning the region, especially South Asia and the world. However, after many months of our deliberation, as Momi mentioned, we could finally begin our webinar series today. It is the first of its kind, and our honorable speakers made it come true for us. We are grateful to the former Minister of Education, Professor Powdyel, for his gift to the world, for sharing his invaluable knowledge on a topic so true, yet sustainable education has not done its duty enough to make education a nobler sector, as you, sir, always refer to, the place it deserves. With your vision and wisdom, we hope the world will continue to surge on the concept of green schools and find their place or their northern star, like the GNH in Bhutan, to find their destination, to their vision, to their desires. Our gratitude to Professor Patnaik, sir. Your hard work on measuring happiness has not only been felt in India, but also visible through World Happiness Report 2019, as you mentioned. Thank you for sharing your learnings, experiences in the subject, and percolating happiness through projects to Madhya Pradesh government, solar projects for poor, making cities measure their happiness and align their development accordingly. And as well, enlightening, I shouldn't forget to mention, innumerable PhD scholars on varying subjects of happiness, from culture, socio-economic, music, art, and many, many more. Thank you to the both of our most honorable speakers that you honored us despite your busy schedule. We know COVID, although it has not been kind to the world, but definitely for us in this webinar series, as you are not on a flight to some far-off land, our shared luck, as much as we enjoyed and learned from you, sirs, the other who are programmed during this time to learn from you would miss it. We're sorry for that. Our heartfelt thanks to the listeners. You are a crucial part of our success. Please keep us blessing in future too with your presence. We are grateful always for the time you took to attend this webinar. Lastly, our immense thanks to our GLAC community headquarters for their unwavering support. Thank you, WebK, for introducing GLAC, and Annie for being a part of us. GLAC South Asia will always be indebted to both of our honorable speakers and all those who attended the webinar today and our headquarters for being there with us. Let us applaud our speakers, guests, and the head office. And thank you, my friends in the GLAC South Asia community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Before we close, one last poll for all of you listeners. Kindly give your views. And yeah, so there it is on your screen. We would like to know from you how was the webinar in sharing the expertise on the team. And I'm very glad to see that all of you have benefited a lot from this. We would love to, carry on this conversation forward on the dialogue series. And last of all, Dr. Samdu, it would not have been possible but for you to have guided us all at the GLAC team and to have introduced us to these wonderful and insightful, eminent, distinguished experts in the field. Thank you, everyone. And I would also like to thank Renuka, Momi, Dr. Manjunath, Gaurav, Anna, and of course, Dr. Webke for your leadership in all these efforts. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.